Is everybody ready? I will begin now. I'd like to start by thanking all of you guys for coming here today, but I'd also like to remind you how lucky you are. I'm taking Quest 1 right now. Sam is in my class, Jacob's also in this class, and our professor has us handwrite every single essay, right? We have to handwrite all of our preparation. We have to handwrite all of our sources. We have to handwrite the entire essay in a blue book and deliver it to him physically in his office. Why is this done? Yes, he's very eccentric. Yes, he's kind of crazy. He did kick Nicholas out of class one time for doing his taxes there, but it's because of cheating. He wants us to learn a little bit more, and admittedly, this is a very smart man. He went to Harvard, then Princeton once more for his PhD. And I sort of think that this style of education is better for students, which is why I'm proud today to affirm the resolution. In online exams, select all that apply questions should be preferred over multiple choice questions. Let's start with some definitions first. Online exams are 4 grade examinations that occur online. Simple. Select all that apply are multiple correct answers within a bank of answer choices. Should, good idea. Preferred, according to Oxford Dictionary, means tend to choose. If something is preferred, you tend to choose it. Multiple choice, only one right answer. And finally, the weighing mechanism, which is net benefits to education. Now let's talk about the framing. I'm not saying no more multiple choice questions. That would be absurd. What I'm saying is that when you've got an examination that can contain both, there definitely should be more. Select all that apply questions. Now, let's move on to my first contention, which is that of better for learning, and that is better for learning. I've got a bunch of subpoints, judges, so leave room. There's 3 of them. Subpoint A, more discerning, and that is more discerning. Examinations with more select all that apply questions are more discerning. The purpose of an exam is to examine the capabilities of the person who is taking this test. Select all that apply does it better. Let's take a look at some evidence. According to the Journal of Currents in Pharmacy Teaching and Learning in 2024, and a study done across 2 years of pharmacy grad school students, they found directly that select all that apply questions are significantly better at identifying students that know the material. This is for several reasons. The first reason is that multiple choice questions are simple. They are easy. They contain the lowest form of memorization, and that is recognition. We've all done this before, and we've experienced this phenomenon. You don't know the answer because you can't explain it, you just recognize the term. If you've ever taken a conceptually hard class before, these kind of questions have carried you. But are they good for your long-term academic and career prospects? No. Subpoint B, complexity of thought, and that is complexity of thought. As the object of education is to make you a more learned and intelligent individual, questions that force you to study more and understand the material more should be preferred. Let's take a look at some evidence for this. According to the Journal of Applied Research in Memory and Cognition in 2018, a very good journal that studies this kind of stuff, it says that you are engaging more of your brain with select all that apply. Why is this? You require critical reasoning. Again, multiple choice questions bank off of recognition. I have seen this term before. Select all that apply requires you to do something very real. In the real world, there are multiple causes to many problems. If you are an engineer or someone studying physics, you know that there are many tricky forces that you have to remember. If I asked you just about friction, you'd maybe get a 100% on every physics test. But when you have to draw free body diagrams, it engages your memory and it asks you to do real work. This study basically goes on to say that when we have more select all that apply questions, you're forced to think more critically, and it grows your brain power, making you a better thinker. Subpoint C, greater retainment, and that is greater retainment. This contention basically tells us that with more select all that apply, you study and retain the information better. According to Marketing and Education Review in 2025, and a peer-reviewed study specifically in online settings, they found that select all that apply questions are linked to deeper learning and higher retention. The first impact is that this leads to better performance academically in the long run. The study directly says this. You will do better as a student and in your career if you have questions that engage your brain more. The second impact is that researchers, while they encourage using both on exams, say definitively more select all that apply is better. They prefer select all that apply. And then my second contention, reduced cheating. That is reduced cheating. Subpoint A, LLMs. LLMs, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, all of them are a type of AI that are very good at one particular thing, and that is pattern recognition. They do recognition, the lowest form of memorization. They're not very good at select all that apply. According to AI researchers at Amazon on October 17th, 2025, so just about a week ago, they say that LLMs are very bad at select all that apply questions because there is a fundamental limit in modern LLMs that forces them not to be able to critically think as well. I basically say that in a study of 27 different LLMs, even the best one is only 48% accurate when it comes to select all that apply. What's the impact here? My subpoint B, reduced cheating. According to the American Psychological Association in 2022 and an analysis of pre- and post-COVID tests, they say in online formats, it is easy to reduce cheating by adding more select all that apply. Why is this? We've all taken an exam before. We've all asked ChatGPT a couple of questions. Maybe even some of you are brave enough to admit that you have cheated. If this is not possible because ChatGPT is not good good enough at it, you will be forced to study, you will be forced to learn, you will be forced to be a better student. These are all of the benefits to education, and I now stand open for cross-examination. Thank you very much.
All right, we are in line for 2 minutes. Let me go ahead and move over here real quick. All right, we are in line for 2 minutes of cross-examination. Judges, ready? Audience, ready? Ben, ready? All right, let's go ahead and start. Naturally, Ben, a great speech, just a couple of clarifying questions. Let's talk about the part about making new questions here, right? Now, how many of these questions that are select all that apply are actually good quality? Is there any kind of stat on that?
I suppose good quality would depend on what you or the researcher considers good quality. And my research alongside my two great preppers, Thomas and Evan, we didn't find anything to suggest that there was a definitive metric for good quality questions or an estimate.
Awesome. Let's talk about specific tests, right? What tests out there specifically employ select all that apply questions?
I believe the MCAT does. You know a little bit more about that than I would, though, having taken it and been accepted to medical school. Congratulations again, by the way.
Thank you, Ben. But let's go ahead and talk about a couple of other things here, right? Let's talk about the part about students cheating here. If a student realizes they cannot cheat on an exam, is their immediate response to just start studying?
The logical response is to start studying. Again, students prioritize their grades. And if I know, and if I have an easy professor, like my German 3 professor, that'll let me be 20 minutes late to class, I'll be 20 minutes late to class. But if I know that I can't do this because I'm taking Mark Worthy, and he is, for lack of a better phrase, a hard ass, I'm going to study very hard because my grades are very important to me. Sarah Funderburg can tell you a little more about that. We've got physics together.
Right, let's talk about physics here, for example, right? So you're saying every single student sitting in a physics class that realizes they can't cheat is going to immediately hit the books here. Just to make sure.
Oh, of course.
Of course? Okay.
That would be ridiculous, but I think that the majority of them would. And again, even if you give good students the opportunity to cheat, it's tempting. They will learn more when they are actually forced to understand the material.
Sounds great. So the amount of students that are actually retaining info, what are your numbers on that?
Oh, again, it just has there is a direct correlation, no, not correlation, a direct causation between select all that apply questions and actually better retention.
So are we actually seeing quantifiable results of this direct retention? Or are we
and
just
no, it
saying
sounds like there
retention?
should be quantifiable evidence, but the thing is, this is not how it works because we'd have to study all students. What they find is a direct link between these two things. Having questions that cause you to engage in the information cause you to retain it more. Is that retention 100% better, 200% better? It's really hard to quantify that because the brain is an enigma and that's not really how memory works. But again, there is a direct causational link.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, I am in line for a 6-minute negative constructive speech. Audience, ready. Judges, ready. And Ben, ready. All right, let's go ahead and start. Audience, the two scariest things to ever happen to me are 1, having to watch K-pop Demon Hunters with fans, but 2, taking my MCAT. That was the worst thing I have ever gone through. And because of that, I stand in firm negation of the resolution resolved. In online exams, select all that apply questions should be preferred over multiple choice questions. First things first, hi, if you haven't met me, my name's Vineeth. I'm pretty sure most of us have met. I first want to go ahead and give the fuzziest blanket of thank yous to everyone today. I get it, being here at this time sucks, and we all have other things we could be doing, so thank you so much. Ben, you're an awesome opponent to go up against. For the Ben and I lore, I met Ben in my second ever speech and debate tournament 8 years ago. I know, unk status. But with that being said, I agree with all of Ben's definitions and everything he says for the Wang mechanism. Let's go ahead and first, though, give a little bit of a top case observation. Judges, Ben has to basically prove to you that choosing to use select all that apply questions is going to actually increase how much students are learning here, and it is going to cause a specific benefit that is objectively better than multiple choice questions. If Ben isn't able to do that by the resolution, he basically fails to meet what his burden is in today's round. With that being said, let's go ahead and springboard over toward the actual case here. My first contention is no help. No help. Because as we can specifically see here, select all that apply questions are like me whenever I ask Siri for relationship advice. Absolutely no help in the slightest. Let's go ahead and go toward the first evidence points from Edutopia in 2019 as they articulate. Is that teaching and instruction actually help students learn critical thinking skills, not the actual exams themselves here. And let's go ahead and go to a really good evidence point from NurseSpeak. As NurseSpeak, nurses that take the COMLEX exam, one of the few exams that actually uses select all that apply questions, what they specifically say is that select all that apply questions, and why I asked Ben about the quality of them in cross-examination, are way easier to write poorly when they are made, and when they are written poorly, all they are able to test is the rote rehearsal of information. This is really important, Judge, because remember, Ben's entire second subpoint in his first contention was about complexity of thought, but as we're seeing, the vast majority of these questions never actually get to test that complexity of thought in the first place. They are just as good as multiple choice questions here. But let's go ahead and give you some examples of tests that actually use multiple choice format. First thing, Ben is objectively wrong about the MCAT. It is a single choice test. The MCAT, LSAT, USMLE, GRE, ACT, and SAT are all examples of tests online that specifically use a multiple choice format. Now, why am I listing specific tests towards you? Because as we can specifically see here earlier, from the exact same evidence Ben provides you in his speech, from the Journal of Currents in Pharmacy Teaching, we specifically see that later on in this evidence point, they found a non-statistically significant increase in using select all that apply questions versus multiple choice questions. Judges, here's the thing. If Ben wants to hang his hat on the fact that there's going to be an increase in students actually learning more information, Ben has to come up to you in his speech and effectively quantify that towards you. Notice throughout the entirety of his first constructive, all he tells you is all of these really, really cool benefits, but the reality, Judges, he gives you all these benefits, but he never actually gives you impacts as to students learning more about this. Don't do the heavy lifting for Ben. He never actually gives you this for a reason. But let's go ahead and springboard over toward my second contention, mental health. Judge, when I was studying for my MCAT, it was so bad that I sobbed on the floor of my bathroom eating Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Not glamorous, but surprisingly effective. But Taylor and Francis specifically tells us from Marketing Education Review in 2025 that the possible side effects of multiple answer questions I select all the above is that they can increase text-related anxiety more than any other kind of assessment. Specifically, what we are able to see is that the article tells us further that looking at latitudinal differences, it was evident that students that had less favorable views of select all that apply questions compared to multiple choice questions, with a p-value of 0.002 indicating statistical significance. But there's more toward this, as Editopia articulates this perfectly for us in 2022. As they explain, test anxiety on the rise has had really real impacts on students medically, causing cortisol, the chemical behind stress, to go up 15%, leading to an 80-point drop in SAT scores here. Yes, Ben's gonna come up here in his speech and say, okay, this applies to multiple choice questions, but when you bring select all that apply questions, which have been seen as more stressful on students, you only exacerbate these negative impacts further. You don't actually improve good benefits for students. But next, as we specifically see from the University of Kansas in 2021, that the rise in test anxiety leads to mood swings, worse sleep schedules, and overall worse lifestyles for the students themselves. But let's go ahead and actually jump over towards Ben's case here, because there are a lot of inconsistencies with it. Let's deal with Ben's first contention, better for learning, his first subpoint, more discerning. And Ben basically gives you this evidence from the pharmacy evidence, and Judge, the response back to here is the exact same evidence literally tells you that when we compare the two kinds of question types, there is no statistical significance. There's a reason why Ben gives you all these benefits and no kinds of impacts, because all the good things he talks to you about never actually get to have their impacts. Let's deal with his second contention, complexity of thought. And what Ben basically only tells you here, Judges, oh, well, they're really good for us to actually test students. The vast majority of times, these questions are never going to actually be at that quality. Most of these kinds of questions test rote rehearsal like we see in multiple choice questions. Let's go toward the third subpoint, which is greater retainment. And as we actually see, the same pharmacy evidence shows that we are not actually retaining more information, it does the exact same. Finally, for contention 2, reduce cheating. Judges, if people are going to be more stressed, they are not going to default to more studying, they are going to find more ways of cheating, or in just some cases, choose to fail altogether. His point here is entirely inaccurate. For these reasons, it's imperative we look for the negation.
Alrighty. I'm just gonna scoot right over here.
Go for it.
2 minutes on the clock. Is everybody ready? I'll begin now. Well, that was a fantastic speech, but naturally, I have a couple of questions. So let's go ahead and talk about this. These questions, select all that apply, are more likely to be written poorly as opposed to multiple choice.
Absolutely.
Why do we think this?
Yeah, because when you're actually writing select all that apply questions, what you specifically see is that people go into these questions with the mindset of trying to test all of these different things on students.
Let me rephrase my question. What's the evidence that this is the case?
Well, they specifically looked at different kinds of people that wrote different choice questions.
Who is they?
The actual evidence that I provide you here.
And what would that be?
The evidence comes from NurseSpeak, and it looked at the
Nurse
complex
Speak.
exam.
And what is
specifically.
Nurse Speaks?
Yeah, NurseSpeak specifically looks at nurses that took different kinds of the complex exams.
So specifically nursing exams?
Well, the only exam that actually uses select all that apply
The
is
only
the
exam?
complex exam. The only big one that uses
The only
select
big
all that
one.
apply.
Is the bar not a big exam?
The bar is a single choice exam. Well, the bar is a single choice exam to my knowledge.
No, you may be thinking of the LSAT.
The LSAT, yeah. Even
Right.
if the bar uses that, isn't the bar a written exam?
The bar is a different type of exam in different states, and it often includes multiple choice answer questions that I do believe.
Even still,
I'm sorry,
even
this is
still,
cross-examination.
small sample size, right? And
Let's-
still looking at the NCLEX exam.
Right, but we
the
both-
NCLEX exam specifically only.
But
looks
again,
at
doesn't
single choice
it sort of
questions.
does look like we're both looking at one major examination, and again, like, I don't understand, what's the correlation between select all that apply and poor question writing? Again, couldn't you have the same answer choices?
I mean, once
as on
again,
an
whenever we look
choice
at
question?
select all that apply and seeing what specifically that does, we are trying to test so many different concepts that we wind up just testing rote rehearsal instead.
Really?
It tries to have one kind of idea in mind.
How
and
many
then
more
actually gets
concepts do we
going on.
test per select all that apply question than it comes to, for multiple choice questions?
I mean, I don't really have the stats on
Okay,
that, but I
that's
don't think
fine.
it really matters.
And then when we talk about testing anxiety, do you have a study that says that when we include more select all that apply sort of questions on tests leads to a 10% increase in anxiety or
Yeah,
et
it's
cetera?
the entirety of the first evidence
Right,
point.
but
From the
well, your
Taylor
first
experiment.
evidence, doesn't it talk about the SAT, which is to my knowledge not a select all that apply
I'm actually
examination?
really glad you brought that up here because when we look at the SAT, part of the reason that people feel anxious about the SAT specifically is because it is a standardized test. When you specifically bring in select all that apply questions that have been seen to be seen as worse, it only exacerbates the issue.
All right, thank you very much.
Not a problem.
I'm gonna move my pens out of here. All righty. 3 minutes on the clock. Is everybody ready? I will begin now. This is the Fast and the Furious, so I'm going to go right into Vineeth's speech. First of all, it was a great speech, but I disagree with everything. We'll start on his first contention, which is no help, and that is no help. The first big point Vineeth gives you here is that the exam isn't teaching you anything. It is instruction and learning. My response is, I agree. You're not supposed to be learning on the exam. I find myself panicking whenever that happens, but that's on me for not studying enough. You know what would have caused me to study more? Specifically having questions that are more challenging. We find that students get more complacent when they have multiple choice questions. And the evidence that shows you this is one that Vineeth conveniently ignored, which was the Marketing Education Review in 2025, when we directly composed multiple choice questions and then select all that apply, and researchers find definitively that they prefer select all that apply. Why again? Because the type of memorization that multiple choice tests is the simplest of all, rote memorization. Vineeth says this opposite point about select all that apply. Let me prove to you that that's not true. Again, he goes on and he says another thing under his first contention, which is that if we have select all that apply, the questions will be written poorly. I ask him, why does he think this? Here are two things wrong with Vineeth's response. First, the evidence is no good. This is not a peer-reviewed journal. This is not a study that published their sources. He couldn't really explain to us exactly why they would be written poorly. He basically says you're testing too many concepts, but when I ask how many more, he can't tell us the answer to that. The fact of the matter is there is no reason to think that these questions will be written more poorly. Have you ever experienced this yourself in testing? And again, can you imagine writing plausible different reasons to an exam and having students answer on those? If yes, then you can vote for the affirmative on this point. Now let's move on to my opponent's response to the MCAT. Well, I may be wrong, judges. I have not taken the MCAT, but I'm fairly certain that the MCAT does have select all that apply. While we were Googling it during this exam, we found some evidence that said that this has happened. Again, Vineeth could be mistaken, but it doesn't matter because select all that apply is still a common form. It doesn't matter if it exists on one specific exam because the sort of evidence that we're talking about is clinical that I've given you throughout this entire speech. Now his second contention of mental health. Now, my entire response to this is no link, and that is no link. Vineeth makes one big mistake, and he links exams that do not have select all that apply to increased stress. He's basically telling you, judges, when we have the SAT, that is stressful. And my response is yes, because it's the SAT. But he's not told you that when the SAT included select all that apply that increased stress, he's also not told us how much more stress increases. His biggest criticism of me is that I couldn't quantify my impacts, but that's not what this round is about. It's qualitative. When Vineeth can't link a specific side of his resolution to the impact that he's trying to give you, you should throw it out. Now let's defend my case. My first contention, subpoint A, when I talk about discernment, my opponent says that he takes a look at my evidence, specifically on the pharmacy, and says that it washes. That my evidence about pharmacy students actually says the opposite. First, again, this is not true. The pharmacy evidence directly finds that select all that apply are definitely better for retainment and also because they're more discerning. Researchers literally looked at exams that would find whether students were better or worse at the given subject and said that they preferred select all that apply. You don't like that evidence? Marketing of Education Review in 2025 quite literally says the exact same thing, a piece of evidence he didn't touch. My subpoint B, complexity of thought, he says poor quality but doesn't say why. And then on my subpoint C of greater retainment, he again invokes this pharmacy evidence. The Marketing Education Review in 2025 says the opposite, and guess what? So does the APA. For all of these reasons, you can feel very comfortable voting for the affirmative.
right, I'm in line for the final speech for the negation, 5 minutes. Audience, ready. Judges, ready. And Ben, ready to go? All right, let's go ahead and start. All right, this is my final time speaking, literally so soon. I literally just spoke a moment ago. But one more time, I want to go ahead and big the fuzziest blanket of thanks towards everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really means a lot. Ben, this has been an awesome debate round. I can't wait to go into this a little bit more in detail. I'm going to first basically go and give some defenses toward my case that are, in my opinion, pretty cool. Head back up towards Ben's case and give some responses toward him before finally giving you some voters or reasons you can feel pretty cool voting for the negation in today's debate round. Let's go ahead and jump over toward my case and apply some defenses here. Let's go to my first contention about no help learning. And Judge, Ben's only response here is, okay, you aren't supposed to learn whenever you're taking an exam. Here is the response here. This is objectively false, Judge. Part of the reason when you were trying to take exams is to effectively learn how to take these exams in the near future. Why do we think practice exams for the LSAT, MCAT, GRE, and many others specifically exist? Instead, the only kind of thing Ben wants to actually sell to you is the narrative that, oh, we're looking at too many concepts to test, but he never actually gives you any kind of number. Here's the reason behind this, Judge. The reason why I never actually give you any number behind concepts that make these questions really bad is the exact reason as to why you should be voting neg here. The fact that we never actually have a good baseline of what makes these select all the above questions really bad makes them effectively dangerous because we have no way of preventing them from actually being rote rehearsal. Ben's case and responses never actually touch on this. But let's go toward the next contention about mental health, and he basically tells you here, Judge, that there is absolutely no link toward this, but Judge, this is just objectively inaccurate. Let's go back toward the first that second contention one more time, and what we specifically see in that second contention is I give you the evidence from Taylor and Francis that tells you specifically that when we look at this, we see that when it comes to multiple answer questions, we see that multiple answer questions make students feel more stressed when they actually have to do it. And I specifically tell you that there is going to be a 15% increase in the cortisol levels among stressed students. Ben's entire response here is he gives you no link toward this, and he never actually quantifies it when these are two things that do happen in the negative case. So go ahead and completely disregard that. But let's go ahead, Judge, and go back up towards Ben's case. Let's go towards Ben's first contention about better for learning, and this has kind of been a kind of knife's edge battle about, okay, well, the same evidence says that retainment's gonna be really good here. The thing that you have to remember here, Judge, so the reason why Ben loses this round off of this response is retainment of information is different from actual employment of the information. I can come up here and I can study something to my heart's content and retain the information, but when it actually comes to test day and I am unable to actually employ that information, that is the metric of success that we use today here, and that's what Ben tries to essentially make you forget about here. It's why I give you that same evidence that shows you that we actually don't see an increase in accuracy. When you look at accuracy versus the actual, when you look at accuracy in employment versus the actual retainment of information, you always want to default back toward accuracy because that's what we look towards for success. Ben completely ignores this. But let's go back toward complexity of thought. And one more time, Ben's only response toward this is he never actually tells you how many learning objectives make something really bad here. One more time, this is actually a point for the negation. The fact that we have no number on this makes these questions really dangerous. Ben essentially tries to make you forget about this. Let's go over toward the third subpoint here, and he basically one more time says about greater retainment, and he just talks about the farm evidence showing no link here. One more time, greater retainment does not mean greater actual knowledge and gainment of stuff. You have to remember this clear link. It is how the negation wins today's debate round. Aff tries to essentially make you forget about it. Let's go over toward contention two about reduced cheating. And Ben just completely drops the entire contention here. My response about the fact that if students are unable to cheat on an exam, they are not going to try and study more. They are going to either one, fail the exam, or two, find alternate ways of cheating. Ben completely lets this drop, so flow it over toward the negation side. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump in towards some voters, or reasons you can feel pretty confident voting for the negation today. The first voter reason is the net benefit. The net benefit. The very same mechanism we put at the beginning of today's debate round. Judge, basically see what debater has actually given you a better benefit today. Ben has walked up here in his speech and told you all of these benefits of select all that apply, but the thing that you have to remember is that Ben has never and still hasn't given you an actual quantifiable impact as to how these benefits are actually increasing student learning and retention and actual employment of that knowledge. All he tells you is, oh, they keep more information, but he never actually tells you how that knowledge of how that retention of information actually helps the students. It's why I make that observation at the beginning of my case. The next thing that you specifically have to look to judge is the next voting issue, which is ultimately protecting students, Even if Ben wants to argue for having more people learning more information, if you are endangering the well-being of students by doing that, then you effectively make the education system way worse. If a student feels burned out and is unable to properly feel like their concerns are being taken into account with testing anxiety, then they are not going to be able to learn point blank, period. For these reasons, it is imperative we look toward the negation.
3 minutes on the clock. Is everybody ready? I'm going to go ahead and begin now. Well, I really would like to thank all of you guys for being here today. This is probably the best audience, and I might regret saying this if you guys don't vote for me, but the 3 smartest judges I could ask for on this circuit. We are doing IPDA after all. Now, with that, I've got a couple of things to get into. The first thing I want to talk about is learning. This is an idea that Vineeth addresses in his last speech. He hinges his hat on this pharmacy evidence, right? Because today we are obviously talking about evidence. This is a qualitative, clinical sort of round where we need to take a look at what the experts have studied and decided. And the biggest thing that Vineeth has told us is that the pharmacy evidence that we both cite from this journal that studies pharmacy students across 2 different years finds that select all that apply is not better for retention. It is not better for learning. It is not better at discerning who is the better student. Well, I have 2 responses. First of all, this is not what this evidence says. The entire purpose of this study directly, and I believe that Vineeth is misinterpreting it, is to say that these are the kind of questions, select all that apply, that should be on exams because they force you to critically think. He doesn't wrestle with the ideas that I tell you. If you've got multiple choice, you're doing the most basic form of memorization. I recognize this term and I select it. Every single one of you has experienced this phenomenon all of the time. It's what makes your easiest classes easiest. But when you're actually forced to critically engage with it, you get 2 benefits that Vineeth never negates. This study says that it grows your brain power, makes you a better critical thinker, and also, if you move on to my next piece of evidence, which Vineeth never talks about, which is in my first contention, subpoint C, the Marketing Education Review in 2025, they say definitively that students that are better at critical thinking because of select all that apply have better academic outcomes later in life and have better, basically, career results career-wise. This is important for a couple of reasons. First of all, Vineeth never addressed this. He hinges all of his arguments on the fact that my evidence is mistaken or that I'm linking all of the benefits to retention, but that's not true, judges. The fact of the matter is better understanding and complex thought comes first with retention. You cannot understand it, you cannot dissect it complexly if you do not first understand it, and you are much more likely to understand it and retain it with select all that applies. Let's move on to this next idea of cheating. No, judges, I did not drop this contention. Vineeth dropped this contention. He didn't say anything about my 27 LLM study that says specifically that they can't do select all that apply, and he also dropped my study that analyzed students pre-COVID and post-COVID that says that with cheating it got better, at least for teachers that is, when we added more select all that applies. This is something that definitely flows over to the affirmative. Now, why should you feel comfortable voting for me and not for my opponent? The weighing mechanism is net benefits to education, and the best argument that Vineeth has is stress to students, but he does one thing wrong. He doesn't definitively link this to worse outcomes for education. He gives you some sort of vague 15% cortisol level, might I add, a new statistic in his second speech, but what he doesn't tell you is how bad this is for education. And because he doesn't do that, he simply cannot win the round as the negative. He accepted the weighing mechanism. It was his job to tell you that education will be worse. Let me tell you why it will be better. My first voter is better outcomes in life, and that is better outcomes in life. All of the evidence, even the ones that Vineeth cite, tell you that you will get better at critical thinking. This is something you have to do in real life, and it leads to better outcomes. And then the second voter is going to be better discernment, and that is better discernment. On tests and on exams, you will learn more when you are forced to study more, and you logically will study more if you're not able to force your way through the exam with memorization. You need exams that actually test your brain, not just your memory. Thank you very much.